Story 1. Am I the a-hole for wanting my sister-in-law and her kids to move out of my house? I've been with my boyfriend for 6 years now. After 2 years of dating, we got our own place together, including my stepson, who we have full-time. This was our first ever house we each have had without living with parents or family. My sister-in-law lived with her mom, stepdad, and her 4 kids. She's a single mother. They ended up losing the house because of financial reasons and pretty much had nowhere to go. So I told my partner that his sister and kids can stay with us until she gets her own place. One of her kids ended up staying with their grandmother. Anyway, so my sister-in-law and her 3 kids moved in with my partner, stepson, and I into our small 3-bedroom house. We made it accommodating so we could all live comfortably together. At first, we were pretty close and hung out a lot. But as time went by, we started drifting apart. I think it was because of the fact that my sister-in-law just stayed home all day, didn't get a job or even look for one, never helped out with the bills or rent, and would just go on dates with random guys she met online all the time. My partner and I both worked full-time jobs, and every day I would come home and the house was an absolute mess because of all the kids. They tried to clean it, but honestly, there was no point because it would just end up going back to smeg. I was so sick of it. This went on for over a year. She still didn't have a job and was living here for free. I would tell my partner that she needs to move out, but as she is his big sister, he defended her, even though he was annoyed as well. She ended up getting a boyfriend and would let him stay over at our house with his 2 kids. That's a total of 9 people now in our 3-bedroom house. They would have fights in the house and even broke one of the bedroom doors. My partner and I were so ticked off at the lack of respect they had. They ended up replacing the door, but that was it. I was over it. I started to put a list together of houses up for lease so she could start looking for a place, but she didn't seem interested. Later on, I found out that she was actually speaking to my stepson's biological mother, who at the time was very jealous of my partner and I being together and having my stepson full-time, and trying to come up with ways to try and break my partner and I up. It was the ultimate snake move, in my opinion. It didn't work. We had to sit her down and confront her about it. Can't really forgive her for it, but am I the a-hole for wanting them to move out knowing they kind of had nowhere to go and it wasn't the kids' fault for anything? Not really. She is acting like this is her house. She is inviting other people to stay with them, other people who bring along more people, and undermining the relationship at that. Unfortunately, it seems like you needed to sit this person down and have a talk before they moved in. Let them know that, you need to do this kind of stuff. You need to look for a place. Let people know the expectations. You would do that if you were having a roommate or having someone stay over for a little while. Unfortunately, it seems like you need to do that even more so with people with family or really close friends. Unfortunately, because it's like the old saying among Star Trek Ferengi, family, don't be afraid to exploit them. That's a paraphrase, I'm sure. Story 2. Revenge on the senior employer for messing with us. Someone just linked me to this place and, oh boy, do I have a story for you guys. I'm still proud of this to this day. Obligatory throwaway disclaimer, and all names are changed. A few years ago, I was working in a job I really enjoyed with a team I really gelled with. There were about 5 of us working on the same portfolio of projects in different roles, and every single team member was just cream of the crop, incredibly good at what they do. I can't overemphasize how satisfying it was to work with such an incredibly competent, likable group of people. In this job, instead of getting the Sunday night blues, I would get excited thinking about the work I would be doing the next day and planning how we would solve the complex problems together. It was like a series of logic puzzles. Yes, I realize I'm a huge nerd. I promise. I also have a life outside of work. The one downside, there's always a downside, to this job, was Steve. Steve was not in the supervisory line for me or any of the team members, but he was about 3 levels above us and very senior. He had been there for years and was tight with senior leadership. Steve was also a mega creep. He said extremely inappropriate things to young women in the office, and he apparently wasn't averse to being handsy, though as far as anyone knew, that was as bad as it has gotten. The women in the office all knew to steer clear of him. My first week on the job, the Whisper Network made sure I knew. Never be alone with Steve. Intimate harassment is difficult to document, and no one wanted to risk their career or put a target on their back going after a big guy like Steve, so he just got away with it for years. So for a couple of years, I followed this advice. There were a few instances of Steve saying incredibly uncomfortable things to me in passing, but for the most part, I managed to avoid him. Then I found out that my teammate Rob had gotten on Steve's radar. For context, Rob is non-neurotypical and has some minor tickish behavior. He's also shy and easily spirals into social anxiety when put in uncomfortable situations. So one evening, at our team's informal weekly happy hour after work, Rob lets it slip that Steve's been giving him a hard time. The rest of us are like, whoa, wait, what? Because Steve never interacts with staff at our level, except to creep on women, and we basically make Rob tell us everything. Basically, for the last few weeks, Steve has been bullying Rob, making fun of his tics, and mimicking his way of speaking back to him. He's also been asking Rob how he can possibly be competent to do his job and implying he's a pity hire. Once, he called him a R-word. It's clear Steve is seeking out Rob for this because, again, there's really no reason for him to interact with our team. Rob has been having horrible anxiety over this situation and has had bad insomnia and stomach issues since Steve started targeting him. And not that it bears repeating, but just to reiterate, Rob is an absolute beast at his job and a genuinely good guy. At this point, I'm seeing red. We all are. We tell Rob to go to HR, that his neurological issues put him in a protected ADA class, that he could get Steve in big trouble. Rob panics and says he can't do that, begs us not to tell anyone at work, and says he wishes he hadn't said anything. We assure him we won't say anything if that's what he wants, but we're all very distressed. I leave the bar fuming, just thinking, okay, that's it. Curse you, Steve. You're going down. I can't tell anyone about what's happening to Rob because I promised him as much, so I start my own paper trail. I start baiting Steve. And I don't mean I behave in a suggestive manner or lead him off. I just stop avoiding him. And I even initiate contact myself. I IM him through the company's IM system very professionally and politely, asking if a big client will be staying on through the next project cycle, and the floodgates open. He starts sending me outrageous, spicy IMs. I mostly don't respond, but I occasionally keep him going by sending extremely literal responses to his innuendo-laden questions and pretending not to understand something suggestive he's saying. Sometimes, when he clarifies, I'll outright say, "This isn't appropriate," or "This is making me uncomfortable," or "Please don't say things like that, Steve." But he steamrolls right over me. During this time, I've also been seeing him more in person around the office, and he often says gross stuff to me in person as well. A lot of it not just inappropriate, but bizarre and nonsensical. "Is it legal to have a butt like that in that skirt?" What? Every time this happens, I immediately go back to my desk and write down what he said, the date and time, and the names of any witnesses. About a month and change after this, I compile my creep journal with printouts of the IM conversations and take them to my HR rep. I ask to file an intimate harassment complaint against Steve. As soon as the words intimate harassment leave my mouth, my rep instantly gets the head of HR and 2 other reps, and they go through my evidence with me and ask me a ton of questions. The head of HR assures me they'll take my complaints very seriously and asks if I know of any women around the office who have had similar issues with Steve. I'm able to give them several names. They send me on my way, and 2 weeks later, my rep formally reaches out to me and lets me know Steve has been let go. Much jubilation is had around the office. It took a couple of months for me to piece together the whole story, but basically, after my complaint, HR started following up with the names I gave them, both the witnesses to my in-person encounters with Steve and the other women he'd harassed. They corroborated what I told HR, and then through them, word started spreading around the office that HR was conducting an intimate harassment investigation against Steve. This emboldened at least 15 different women who had been biting their tongues about Steve for ages to come forward and tell their own Steve stories. The worst story was from a junior staff member who Steve had intimately assaulted at a company party the year prior. During all of this, IT had been asked to go through Steve's emails and IMs, and this had not only been used to validate my printouts as legitimate, but IT had found a ton of additional incriminating stuff in Steve's correspondences. Somewhat frustrating, Steve received an extremely generous severance package as part of his termination. But on the bright side, word got around the industry quickly, and Steve was poisoned at that point. No company would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The last time I thought to snoop on his public social media pages, he was listing himself as an independent consultant in our industry, which I seriously doubt he's actually doing. And based on his public Facebook page, he's doing a couple of MLMs. So that should end whatever savings he has in short order. I don't work with Rob anymore, but I did recently attend his wedding. He's extremely happy with his new wife, who is a sweet and lovely woman, and he's doing really well in his career. Again, document everything. It's really, really important to document everything and know your company's policies and be able to have evidence. Human Resources, thankfully, was very accommodating about investigating in this situation. As a lot of people say, HR is not your friend. They were in this case. They were very helpful, but they're not going to be your friend. Document everything. Have evidence. This wasn't really some sort of devious plan. All they had to do was let this Creep Steve be Creep Steve and just document it all.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 3. How I ended up with my boss's job. I was working for an advertising agency, a pretty big one, where I had an unethical manager. When I started out, I had a manager who was one of the most unethical managers I've ever dealt with. He'd order his sales reps to do things that would increase his bonuses, which are based on margins. Example, say a client decided to buy product XYZ and their spend was $2,000 a month. He would want the agent to put up products ABC and keep the spend at $2,000 even though the client didn't agree to that. Fact is, the clients generally wouldn't notice, but if they did, it could cost you your job. I was the guy that refused his demands. He would tell me to cheat the client, and I would refuse. He would get mad. I would not care. This went on for quite a while. Now, there's something I don't tell people very often. I live in a one-party consent state, which means so long as I'm aware a conversation is being recorded, I can record it without informing the other party. I had just upsold my largest client, making him even larger, but I didn't sell the products my boss wanted me to sell. He demanded I switch things around. I refused. I told him I sold the client XYZ. That's what we agreed to. I'm not going to change that without the customer's permission. His exact words were, "Curse the customer. This is your largest client. I need him on ABC or I'm not going to make my number." I'm sorry, but you and I both know ABC isn't right for this client, and that's why he didn't buy it. You're fired. If you can't follow instructions, you're fired. After confirming he was completely serious, I said, if you do that, I'll have your job by the end of the month. I went home. I didn't think he'd go through with it. Sure as hell, next morning I'm locked out of all our systems. I call tech support and get told I've been fired. So who do I call? I call our regional vice president and tell him I have several recordings I think he should listen to. Remember, my boss ordering me to do unethical things wasn't uncommon? So I met up with my RVP and played 6 different recordings that I had saved showing my manager was pushing his agents to break the law. To which my RVP leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh knowing he had to fire my manager. Having a sales manager that's forcing his reps to break the law is just bad business. At which point, I asked for my job back. He agreed that I would get my job back and asked me to take the week off and call him on Monday. He told me he'd talk to payroll and make sure I got paid for this week as well. FYI, he fulfilled all of his promises with me. Although I missed a payday, but got back pay later, so I was fine with that. That Monday, I came into our Monday morning meeting in which my RVP was there. He informed the entire team that my boss had been fired and why. He also mentioned that if anyone wanted to apply for his job, there was now an opening. So I applied for, and after 3 rounds of interviews, got my promotion. Sure as hell, I was right. I did have my boss's job by the end of the month. It was glorious the first day walking into his office and sitting in his nice, big, comfy chair. I wonder what kind of rep this person had around the office. I think it might have done well for him being the person that stood up to this boss. Maybe all the others had some of their own reasons for kowtowing to this unethical person. Maybe it was just too late for them. Hopefully, this person is a much better boss than this last guy. I have a feeling he might be much more well-revered by other people. Story 4. Neighbor is an a-hole, so I caused a potentially catastrophic rift in his marriage. So this happened a couple weeks ago, but I saw the result earlier today. A bit of backstory. I live in a predominantly Mormon area, and I am not Mormon. I received quite a bit of criticism from my across-the-street neighbor because of the religious difference. I'm assuming. We've never interacted before he started messing with me. He currently has 10 children. About a month ago, on trash day, he told one of his kids to kick my trash can over into the street. The kid did it, and I witnessed everything. This is not the first time he's kicked my trash over, and I figured it was a lost cause to go over there and ask them for some decency more than I already have. That same day, I was reminded by a friend about how I used to have a pen pal when I was younger before I moved. Later that night, I was browsing the web looking for a pen pal when I stumbled upon a cool-sounding site. prisonpenpals.com. I visited the site, and after clicking through a few dodgy links, was brought to an array of different prisoners who were looking for a pen pal. After doing a bit of browsing from there, I stumbled across a fellow who was on death row for first-degree unaliving. Feeling bad for this guy, but not wanting to give my address out, you send an email. The guards print it out and give it to the prisoner, who then writes you a letter and delivers it to your physical address. I remembered the a-hole across the street. More out of curiosity than malice, I proceeded to write a very detailed letter about how I'm trapped, secretly gay, and a Mormon man with 10 kids who is looking to start an extramarital affair with a prisoner. I put in his address and send. I had my hilarious petty satisfaction. I expected nothing to come out of this. I thought he would be going through his mail, see the letter, not open it, toss it, and think nothing of it after that. Oh, but boy was I wrong. Of course, with it being a small town, this guy does run a small business here where one of my acquaintances works. I went in just earlier today and chatted with my acquaintance before he told me, "Oh my deity, did you hear about neighbor?" I said no, because I hadn't, and he filled me in on all the details. Apparently, one of the neighbor's kids had brought in the mail, only for his wife to find it and read the letter from this prisoner's responding to the joke letter that I wrote. I don't know the specifics of the letter, but I do know that his wife threw a total fit when he arrived home and made him pack his bags. My acquaintance informed me that this was not the first time neighbor had started or tried to start an affair with another man. And apparently this was the last straw for her. I am still shocked, horrified, and extremely amused by this predicament. Okay. Do you think it was a little overboard for this person to write this kind of letter? I mean, it was a joke, but how did they know it's a joke? And also, it's weird that it's also, I don't know if it's weird or fortuitous or anything, that it exposed this guy doing this kind of thing before. Is that common in predominantly Mormon areas to be secretly gay like this? Does this happen very often? I'm wondering if this is a bit over the line, but how it just opened up a rift that was already there. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.